There are moments that don't announce themselves. No warning, no dramatic beginning, no unmistakable sign that your life has quietly shifted beneath your feet. They arrive disguised as ordinary conversations, a passing glance, a silence that somehow lingers longer than it should. You almost miss them, almost until you realize you're no longer experiencing the world the way you did yesterday. That's the unsettling part. Change rarely feels like change while it's happening. It feels like recognition, like noticing a detail that had always been there, hidden beneath the noise of routine. And once you notice it, you can't force yourself to become unaware again. I've spent years believing I understood the architecture of my own mind. Every thought had a place, every emotion had a reason. Every connection stayed within carefully measured boundaries. Nothing entered without permission. Nothing remained unless I chose it. Control wasn't something I practiced. It became the language I lived in. Predictability became peace. Distance became protection. Not because people were dangerous, but because assumptions are. People rarely see what's actually in front of them. They see what they're prepared to see. They hear what confirms the story they've already written. And somewhere along the way, I learned to survive inside that misunderstanding. It was easier, safer. If no one truly understood me, then no one could redefine me. That certainty lasted longer than I expected, until something changed. Not because someone arrived claiming to know me, not because anyone demanded access, but because one conversation left a question behind that refused to disappear. It wasn't the words, it was what the words disturbed. A thought I believed was settled suddenly wasn't. A conclusion I trusted developed cracks. And those cracks kept spreading, not quickly, quietly. The strange thing about certainty is that it never collapses all at once. It erodes, one unnoticed contradiction at a time, one unexpected realization after another, until the structure you relied on still looks complete, but no longer feels solid beneath your feet. That's where I found myself, standing inside a version of my own mind that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Not broken, just unfinished. Questions began appearing where answers used to live. Why did certain moments stay with me longer than logic could explain? Why did some conversations continue long after they had ended? Why did silence sometimes reveal more than explanation ever could? I searched for easy answers. Habit, projection, coincidence. The mind is remarkably creative. When it wants to preserve the world, it already understands. But every explanation seemed just incomplete enough to leave the door open. And once a single door remains open, curiosity walks through it. You don't decide to change, you decide to keep looking. That's the difference. Transformation isn't one enormous step. It's the refusal to stop asking difficult questions, even when the answers might rearrange everything you thought you knew about yourself. So I kept looking, not for certainty, not for meaning, just for honesty. Because honesty has a strange quality. It rarely comforts you, it simply removes every place left to hide. And I was beginning to realize that the hardest person to hide from wasn't anyone else, it was myself. The hardest truths don't arrive with evidence. They arrive with discomfort, not the kind that overwhelms you, the kind that quietly follows you through ordinary days. You wake up thinking you've moved on. You tell yourself the questions are settled, that whatever shifted inside you has already passed. Then something small happens, a familiar silence, a sentence that lingers longer than it should, a thought that returns without being invited. And suddenly you realize nothing actually left. It simply became part of the background. That's how the mind changes. Not through dramatic revelations. Through repetition, the same questions, the same observations, the same quiet realization appearing from different angles until denying it requires more effort than acknowledging it. I've always trusted analysis. If something confused me, I examined it. If something unsettled me, I pulled it apart until every piece made sense. Understanding was never optional. It was survival. Because what can be understood can usually be controlled, and what can be controlled rarely becomes frightening. But there are experiences that refuse to stay on the examination table. The more you analyze them, the more they begin analyzing you. You stop asking why something affects you. You start asking why you've spent so much of your life trying not to be affected at all. That question changes everything, because suddenly the subject isn't the experience anymore. It's you, the habits you called strength, the distance you called independence, the certainty you called wisdom. One by one, they begin revealing another purpose: protection, not from other people, from uncertainty, from vulnerability, from the possibility that life might ask more of you than observation alone. It's strange. You can spend years believing you're guarding your peace, only to discover you've also been guarding yourself from being fully present, not intentionally, just gradually. So gradually that the walls stop feeling like walls. They begin feeling like personality, like identity, like the only way you've ever known how to exist, until one honest moment makes you wonder, who would I be without all these defenses? That question has no immediate answer. Only silence. And for the first time, the silence doesn't feel empty, it feels necessary. Because not every unanswered question is a problem waiting to be solved. Some are invitations on invitations to stop forcing certainty, to stop treating every unknown as a threat, to accept that clarity sometimes grows slowly, like dawn replacing darkness. You don't notice the exact second night disappears. Only that eventually, you can see farther than you could before. Maybe that's what real change feels like. Not becoming someone else, becoming someone more honest, someone less afraid of what they might discover, someone willing to admit that the strongest mind isn't the one that never changes, it's the one courageous enough to let truth reshape it when the old answers no longer fit. And perhaps that's where every meaningful transformation truly begins. Not when the world changes around you, but when you finally stop defending the version of yourself you've already outgrown. There comes a moment, not when everything finally makes sense, but when you realize you've stopped needing everything to make sense before you move forward. That frightened me more than uncertainty ever did, because certainty had always been my foundation. It gave every decision a direction, every feeling a definition, every relationship a safe distance. I believed that if I understood everything, nothing could truly change me. I was wrong. Life doesn't wait for complete understanding. It unfolds anyway, quickly, passively, until one day you notice that the person who built all those walls is no longer the person standing behind them. That's what happened to me. The walls were still there, but they no longer felt necessary. Not because the world had become safer, because I had become more honest. I finally understood something I had spent years avoiding. Control can protect your peace, but it can also imprison your growth. The same walls that keep pain outside can also keep possibility from ever reaching you. And the hardest prisons to escape are the ones you've convinced yourself are home. I spent years believing strength meant never being changed by anyone or anything, remaining steady, remaining unreadable, remaining untouched. It sounded powerful, until I realized it also meant remaining alone inside a version of myself that had stopped evolving. Growth isn't comfortable, it never has been. It asks you to release identities that once kept you alive. It asks you to let certainty dissolve before clarity appears. It asks you to trust that losing an old version of yourself isn't failure, it's transformation. That doesn't mean every connection is meant to last forever. It doesn't mean every feeling deserves to become a lifelong commitment. It means every genuine encounter has the potential to reveal something about who you are becoming. Sometimes another person's presence doesn't change your destination. It simply shines a light on a path that was already waiting for you. And when that happens, gratitude matters more than possession. Awareness matters more than certainty. Growth matters more than control. I don't have every answer. I don't know exactly what tomorrow will ask of me, but I know this. The person I was at the beginning of this journey believed that being understood was the greatest risk. The person standing here now understands that refusing to understand yourself is the greater one. Maybe that's the lesson hidden beneath every meaningful transformation. The people who leave the deepest mark on your life aren't always the ones who stay forever. Sometimes they're the ones whose presence quietly reveals a version of you that was waiting to exist all along. And once you've seen that version, you can't return to living as someone smaller, not because the past disappears, but because truth expands the boundaries of who you are. From that moment forward, your responsibility isn't to cling to certainty, it's to keep becoming, even when becoming asks you to walk into the unknown. Because the unknown isn't always where you lose yourself. Sometimes it's where you finally meet yourself. There is something no one tells you about transformation. It isn't the moment you change that stays with you. It's the moment you realize you can't go back. Not because the door is locked, because the person who would have walked back through it no longer exists. That realization is quiet, almost invisible. You wake up one morning expecting to think the way you always have, and instead, your mind pauses, not out of confusion. Out of awareness, the reactions that once defined you don't arrive. The fears that once controlled you speak more softly. The certainty you once clung to no longer feels like safety. It feels like a limitation. That's when you understand something profound. Growth doesn't always add something new. Sometimes it removes what was never truly yours. The need to always be right, the need to always be understood, the need to control every outcome before taking the first step. One by one, those habits begin to loosen their grip, not because you've mastered life, because you've stopped believing life can be mastered. You've begun participating in it instead. For years, I thought wisdom meant predicting every consequence, preparing for every possibility, building a mind so disciplined that nothing unexpected could ever reach it. But life has never rewarded perfect predictions. It rewards presence. The ability to stand inside uncertainty without becoming consumed by it, the ability to admit, I don't know what comes next, and I'm willing to keep walking anyway. That sentence once sounded like weakness. Now it sounds like freedom, because the strongest foundations are not built on certainty. They're built on adaptability, on honesty, on the courage to let reality teach you something your pride never could. I've stopped measuring strength by how untouched I remain. I measure it by how truthfully I can respond when life asks me to grow. That's a different kind of resilience, one that doesn't depend on never falling, one that depends on always learning. Maybe that's why some chapters of life feel so difficult to leave behind. Not because we miss who we were, but because we finally understand why we had to become someone else. Every difficult conversation, every unanswered question, every moment that challenged the stories we told ourselves, they weren't interruptions. They were invitations to become more honest, more present, more fully alive. And perhaps that's all transformation has ever been. Not turning into a different person, but slowly removing everything that kept you from being your truest self. So if you're standing at the edge of change, wondering whether to hold on to the familiar or step into the unknown, remember this: the future rarely asks you to be fearless. It asks you to be willing. Willing to question, willing to grow, willing to let go of the person you needed yesterday so you can become the person tomorrow requires. Because in the end, the greatest transformation isn't discovering a new world. It's discovering that you were capable of becoming someone new all along. And once you truly understand that there is no returning to the life you had before, there is only one direction left: forward.